Well, we're going to do Cloud Interrupted here tonight with Chris Hinch, our Chief Technology Officer with Stratum. And we thought it'd be fun. It's been a year since we talked about Windows Virtual Desktop. We had some engineers on, but since then we've learned a lot, to say the least, especially with COVID. So I thought we'd spend a few moments talking about like some of those lessons learned and some of those big savings we've discovered along the way.
Yeah, no, there's it's the product itself has evolved a lot in a year. Just what Microsoft has done, and then what we've been able to do on top of it. So, I mean, we could start in multitudes of ways, but I mean, I guess the easiest way is Windows Virtual Desktop was meant to kind of make the whole work from home thing easier, right? And people never understood how the desktop support would go. Like if somebody's Outlook doesn't open or their application crashes or whatnot, they didn't know how to get into the things to fix it, right? It's like, well, I need to do a screen share with you. And so it really didn't seem to take much of the kind of day-to-day off your desktop support people. So what we ended up coming up with is we developed a product here inside Stratum. It's the managed modern desktop, right? So we can actually help offset and either one, train you on how to actually support a WVD environment, or we can just take that off your hands and you can put your desktop support people into something else inside your business. So you can reallocate those resources to maybe doing some server projects or trying to, move that server out completely out of the office and put it in the cloud, or just whatever you want them to do.
Yeah. Well, another thing that's changed significantly since we talked was just the way we deploy this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's surprising how fast Microsoft iterated the solution to adapt to this scenario, because more and more people that we were working with, they were trying to support work at home employees that they've never had to deal with this before.
Yeah, so you're right. The entry point from just a technical perspective, like put the cost aside, right? But just the technical perspective, you needed to know, PowerShell scripting. You needed to know how the Azure portal worked inside and out. You need to know how Azure Active Directory worked inside and out. If not Azure Active Directory, right, you need to know how to do an Azure VPN. So you needed to have a multitude of skill sets. So that's why a lot of people would reach out to somebody like us, a partner for them to come into and say, hey, you can help us set this up. So that brings, the actual cost. So now you have to pay somebody to do this. And that's a lot of things to do just on a manual thing. And so you're right. Microsoft has come a long way on making this easier for people to deploy themselves, but there's still a lot to do, right? It's still not, you can pick up and push a button, right? It's not turnkey as everybody would like it. And a lot of third-party providers, especially at the beginning of COVID, came out and they tried to make the entry point, at least from a technical perspective, a lot easier. And people's like, well, I got to get there. And then they didn't realize on the back end, that's where all the cost was, right? So there's like, well, there's a minimum commit, right? And you're locked in now into this contract and there's a minimum commit. And they're like, well, I didn't budget for that. And now they have them, right? It's the classic thing that got you into a contract. So while we've been able to just reduce our technical entry point and our cost of entry point, just because we've done this so many times and we know what we're doing, we were still hearing from a lot of people that, can you make it any cheaper? Can you make it any cheaper? Because it's still not really in budget. I mean, in the world that we're in right now, while people are the businesses, they're making it, they're not, I wouldn't say all of them are thriving, right? They're making it, right? So it's not like they have disposable. They're just trying to get through still. And so what we've done is we've taken some of our intellectual property that we've done. Like, I don't know if we've done a video on it yet, but Jack, you're familiar with our cloud starter kit, right? Where we can, we've kind of, I don't want to say perfected, but we've streamlined the way how we can stand up infrastructure inside the cloud. And we've basically rewrote it and made it for WVD. So we've taken the cost of entry and the time of entry and the technical cost of entry, and we've reduced that workload by 30 to 40% now. So it's a lot more palatable for some of the smaller businesses.
Yeah, and you brought up one other big point there too, is that monthly cost. When that consumption, one of the things that isn't baked into the Microsoft solution, at least not easily, is that being able to set it up so you're only consuming during work hours, for example. Yeah. Being able to take advantage of those scaling requirements More times than not, you can almost pay for the deployment if you get that right.
Yeah, and they don't do a good job at advertising the scale sets, and that's another thing that we make sure that we talk about up front in the process on the ways that they can save money with the consumption like you're talking about. Is there's three main ways on the scale sets, right? And you can do it based on memory, CPU, or even user base. So depending on how your business is, you can say once this box that everybody's hitting on, we'll just pick on users, right? Once I hit 5 users, I'm going to spin up another one automatically so people can start hitting over there. So the 5 that's already logged in don't have the latency that, adding more people is going to, clog up the machine. But you can also set it to back down in the correct way, right? So once this box gets to like 2 and this box is 2, then I'm going to move this over because I can have 5 over there. So we can start shutting machines off pretty easily. And like you said, you're not going to be paying for machines that are standing on. Right.
And another big cost savings that we saw is that I don't think a lot of people realize, when all of these people go to the work from home, we saw an influx. In fact, we've seen recent sales of computers and PCs at an all-time high as they're trying to even produce the necessary hardware. But because of WVD, we've been able to get people to use some smaller and less costly devices like Chromebooks and some other things to help mitigate some of that cost.
Yeah, because you're right. Another good point there is when this first came out, Teams was still ramping up too for Microsoft, right? So they had WVD that was ramping up. They had Teams that was ramping up. They were on probably the plus side of the competition with Slack, but they hadn't really gone after the Zoom like they're going after it right now, right? So it wasn't basically merging those technologies together. And the cool thing that we talk about now is what Microsoft has done is because Teams is obviously Microsoft and WVD is obviously Microsoft, right? So they're on the same backbone. So instead of you leaving the Microsoft platform to go out to use Teams, right, which creates latency, which could create packet loss, which now your video and your audio is going to drop, right? They never leave. They've figured out a way where if it's a Teams oriented stuff, they streamline it back through Microsoft into their network, into Teams. And since we've started using it here at Stratum, we've started using WVD even more. I've noticed a big difference from Teams when I'm just talking to a normal client on my computer versus when I'm talking to somebody from my WVD session. It's sometimes, when we're on our own, if somebody has a break in the internet or whatnot, you can kind of see them talking but not hear it. You remember back in the old days when you used to see that?
Yeah.
You still get a glimpse of that sometimes, but in the WVD sessions, I never see that.
Yeah. No, and then we early on too, every once in a while, we'll run into somebody who is really concerned about security and how this even works. So then we started to delve into privileged access workstations, where that is really a deep dive on some of that, and that probably in itself probably will necessitate a video.
Yeah, I mean, you can take another good call out. So you could take WVD, you can make it as secure as you want. You can lock things down with how they've evolved remote apps, right? When we did the first video on this, remote apps was still just kind of coming out, still really kind of taking its form. And we've done some really cool projects where I just want to have this very locked down browser and that's all they can get to, but I need to make sure it's always coming from this one IP address, right? And that if they want to access it, they can only access it from this IP address. So you can put some really cool rules in there to make sure that your whatever compliancy or audit that you're trying to pass, the way how they built things now, you can just expose just what you want. And a cool thing about remote apps too, right? So instead of you logging into an actual box and consuming just Windows and just Notepad and all those other things that are minuscule, but when you're paying for consumption base, they add up. You're just exposing the browser, right? So it's even reducing the cost even more.
Yeah, no, the remote apps is particularly of interest because being able to, it's almost seamless to the end user too. It's kind of neat. Other than the icon changing a little bit, showing that it's essentially a remote app.
Yep. Right.
It just mounts on just like any other application on their PC, and they're just launching it.
Yeah, because it's all just happening right through the browser, and so they don't even know.
Yeah, and then I thought one of the more interesting projects that we worked on was we were helping a architecture firm with some pretty high-end
this one,
WVD instances where they needed some GPU power. And I know
yeah.
those GPU machines are far more expensive, but even those have started to come down with options with AMD and a few other things. But it's actually pretty surprising. It's almost nothing we don't see any limitations now at what type of software and what type of machines we can actually operate.
Yeah, I remember when we did that, when we were doing the proof of concept with that company, and it's like, you're never going to match the performance that we get on this guy's computer. And I remember, I think you were on the call with us where we did the side-by-side comparison when they were doing the screen share with was it the FishGI or FishGL website? And they put it on his computer and on the WVD, and they were both like right in step with each other. And we even impressed him, I thought.
Yeah, no, it's pretty impressive. Like, so outside of what we have, I mean, we've gone as far as now writing up a list of prerequisites that we hand over before every deployment, just to make things easier for our customers. Is there anything else people probably should be aware of before they tackle WVD?
Be aware of. I wouldn't say be aware of, but something that they need to really put thought in is people don't understand how much they can share. They're stuck in this mindset where, he's a manager, he needs his own access on this home machine, and they think that, because that person is a manager or that person he has a specific duty, that he needs what they refer to as the personal or the persistent desktop, and they think that cost is going to balloon. And what we've been encouraging them and what we show them is you can still put them in a pooled scenario, which pooled is what you want to do inside the WVD, because now you can share that cost out, right? And so we educate them on how they can do it. We even done proof of concepts to say, let's have Jack log into this machine, let's have Chris log into the same machine and have the same thing. Let's just see if they can do the job, right? Let's just build you one image, kick the tires on it, right? Take it for a drive around the block and just see if you can function. If you can, why do you need a persistent desktop? You don't. You can use the pooled scenario. And then you can start really driving down that cost per user instead of in the persistent world, you're at, I think we got the most cheap one that we did on persistent was like $25 a user per month. You can drive that down to $3-4 per user per month. I mean, you talk about a WVD session and a Chromebook versus like, a $2,000 laptop. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer.
Yeah. No, and what I think is really interesting is that what you just said there, it can be just that cost efficient if they take the time. But what I really think is I really don't want anybody to get frustrated either, because what's really neat about that is that if it doesn't meet the experience right away, you can turn up the dials, turn down the dials, depending on the resources and the allocation that is made, to improve the experience or to do cost optimization.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's many ways you can, and that's, you make another good call. So what we've done on the clients that, they want a like-to-like experience right now, you're right, we do crank that dial up. And then we let them kick the tires for a couple of weeks. And it's like, how's everything going? It's like, oh, we don't miss a beat. I'm like, well, you're only using 50% of the machine. We can dial it back and save you some money. And they're like, oh, really? And so we'll tweak it back just a little bit. I'm like, how's it going now? Have you made the change yet? Yeah, we've made significant changes,
Yeah. No, and I think that's another argument to talk to a managed service provider, like Stratum, or because we're constantly monitoring and trying to help keep some of those costs under control.
Yeah, we help keep the costs under control, and we have ways to actually make sure that the scaling rules happen, right? I know that Microsoft's done a great job of doing the scaling technology, but it's still a machine, right? It's still a program. There's going to be things that have hiccups. Things are going to fail. And so on the back end, we've actually put in services on top that you can get with us to make sure that things are scaling, right? To make sure that if you put a 70% rule, that, if it sits at 72 for 6 minutes, then we're going to be alerted. Hey, why didn't you scale up, right? Or you're going to see that a process keeps hanging, and we'll be able to see that, and we'll say, maybe we need to run an update on your golden image. Maybe we need to do a maintenance window. And another thing there too, right? For desktop support people, you were always fighting driver. Remember, I don't know if you remember back in the day, Jack, but it's like the printer works for this person, but not for that person, because there's driver incompatibilities because, their motherboard is like 2 firmwares back from their motherboard, right? And in WVD, all that's gone, right? That's the really cool thing. It's like you don't have the driver or the platform related issues anymore, because if one person's experiencing it, I'm going to say 90% of the time everybody else is going to be experiencing it too.
Sure. Well, what we would drive then is, at this point, is if anybody is out there that would like more information or talk to Chris or myself regarding WVD or any of our solutions for that matter, head over to stratumtechnology.com and reach out through there. We can definitely set up a one-on-one call and just chat through a few things.
Yeah, we can chat through some things. We can show you a demo. We can give you a live demo as it sits right now. So yeah, let's kick the tires on it together.
Thank you for watching Stratum's Cloud Interrupted. If you like what you see, please subscribe, like, and share this video.